This is the Wise Guy Radio Show, a podcast dedicated to educating and inspiring through conversations with today's top talents in the world of glass. We will be dissecting their journeys in hopes to deliver actionable content that you, the artist, can start implementing now, helping you grow not only as a creative spirit, but also a successful artistic entrepreneur. With a little organization, relationship building, and your artistic ability, you can obtain greatness. Climb aboard. Whether an artist, retail owner, or enthusiast, we have a ton of fun in store for you. Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show. This episode is brought to you by Mountain Glass Arts. Mountain Glass now has their December sales running from now until the end of December 2015. You can now get borosilicate AccuGrind joints for 15% off by putting in code AccuGrind. That's ACCUGRIND at checkout. And they also have their Soft Glass COE 104 sale, jewelry making essentials for 25% off. Just put in the word jewelry at checkout. That's JEWELRY. Just go to mountainglass.com for more information. And this show is also brought to you by Green Flash Glass. And Green Flash Glass is now offering 10% off all sales from now through the end of December 2015. If you are a wholesaler, retail store, get a hold of them through their website at greenflashglass.com. Give them a phone call and place your order. That is greenflashglass.com. And all sales are always free shipping that are $1,000 or more. And now on with the show. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show, episode number 68. This is Jay Michael, your host. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It's this fun last week here before the Christmas begins and then into the New Year's, and super pumped to be here as I finalize all my last-minute orders, along with you guys are probably doing the same thing, and nothing better than getting everything done and feeling accomplished and sitting back and then relaxing with some family for a couple of days before we prepare for 2016. Holy shit. So today we are going to be getting into our Glass Knowledge segment with Shane Penn from Instagram. His Instagram page is at Glass Knowledge, and we are going to be talking about line work today and all the variations of the techniques, how they're done. Throughout this process of him and I doing that particular segment, I was having some kind of fun little brain farts and trying to explain the process, but I think it came out pretty good, and we were able to kind of clarify some stuff. So when it gets a little slow at the start, so bear with us as we get into it, and kind of go from there. And I'm actually heading to the studio right now. Set up yesterday to do 2 interviews and also record today's segment, and for some reason my microphone plugins were not working. I don't know what the deal is, but I'm having some technical difficulties. So I'm going to be taking my mixer over to my place I got it from, over to Guitar Center, and have them check it out for me to see what the issue is. So until then, I apologize for the sound quality, but I'm going to have to be doing it on my app on my phone for right now. But at least I can get the show out. And so before I do, though, get into today's show, I wanted to discuss real quick kind of a somber note of something that's been going on in our community and the industry here in the States. And it's something that's been a problematic issue for years, and it has to do with substance abuse in the community. Certain individuals who find that the ability to make a piece of glass and then sell it pretty quickly to then turn around and then go purchase their drugs for themselves continuously has become a vicious cycle. And just recently, I'm not going to say names or call anybody out, but this has also now happened again. And there's been several artists, including myself, that have been, what I'll say, quote-unquote, scammed out of some money. So if anybody out there knows anybody in their circle that does have any kind of substance abuse issues, and I'm talking like pills and some of the heavy stuff, if you're a true friend to them, I would ask please just have a sit down and talk with them. Maybe see if they are willing to talk about it. If not, it's nothing we want to push necessarily. But because of what I've been reading on the social media feeds and people out there that have gotten burnt, and that have gotten burnt for a substantial amount of money, and happening at this time of year, it's pretty shitty. And unfortunately, it kind of, I'm not going to say it puts a blemish on our industry, but it does, I guess I'm trying to say, because our community is small, if you do have a bad name or reputation, it spreads like wildfire, and it's easy to get blacklisted in this community. No matter how long you have been behind the torch, no matter how your past reputation was, if you currently are fucking people over and that kind of stuff, stealing money, what have you, you're immediately going to be blacklisted, and it takes a long time to come around. So I'm just going to say that if anybody contacts you trying to sell things, offering sales, and you do want to make a purchase, out of trust, do not use MoneyGram. Make sure you use PayPal and or a debit or credit card, so that way you can get a refund. The process of those of us currently that have been screwed over, it was through MoneyGram money sending, which is something I've never done before, and it was a first for myself. And again, for some other folks out there too. And because we are all, really most of us, if not 95% of us, all have big hearts, and we want to help, and we want to serve, and we want to be friends to each other, whether we know each other personally or not. So it's not uncommon for us to ask for money for charity, for people that have hospital bills they can't afford, all that kind of stuff. And when someone contacts you and pulls on your heartstrings with a sad story, and they're trying to sell some stuff that they have at a very, very reasonable, affordable price, I hate to say it, but it's that whole, what's that line I'm looking for? I'm still waking up, so I can't think of it. But you know what I'm saying. So if you're going to be purchasing anything from anybody over the internet that you do not know personally, do not send the money via MoneyGram, because you will not be able to get your money back, unfortunately. They even warn you before you hit the send button to confirm you're sending, to make sure that you do know this person and that you do know that you are not going to be scammed, because if you are scammed, you're just basically scammed and you're fucked. So, yeah, that's my little PSA there. So, just for those of you out there, again, that have and know people that do have substance abuse issues, be a friend, and especially this time of year, and just try and see what you can do to help. Because as we know, we don't want to feed these issues. We want to help, but we don't want to enable. So, that being said, there you guys go. Don't forget, too, my last episode, 67, I announced our first trivia question for the show, which this coming Friday, which is going to be Christmas, I'm going to be randomly drawing a name out of a hat to pick a winner for the trivia question. And the question, again, I'm going to go over is in my episode with Mongo Glass, which I believe was episode 63. He discussed a little fun story, if you want to call it fun, him and a friend of his that were having some concert activities and went home for something, and they parked on their sidewalk. And they were stopped subsequently by the police asking why they were parked on the sidewalk. And the question is, what city were they in when that thing went down? So basically, you guys have up until Christmas Eve at midnight, which that will be Eastern time, to answer. Actually, you know what? I'm going to say Christmas Eve Pacific time, and at midnight. And I will then Christmas morning get up after we do our family stuff, and then draw a name, and then I will announce it on Instagram and my Facebook page, and then also in the show as well. And all you got to do is answer the question, what city was Mongo in when he had that situation occur where he had to park on the sidewalk? And all you have to do is send your answer to info@wiseguyradio.com. And then again, out of all the people that got the answer right, I will then draw a name out of a hat and randomly pick one, and you will be the winner. And you'll be getting a sticker pack, a pendant that I have created for this particular item, for this giveaway, and a couple other fun things too as well. So there you guys go. And then coming up next week, I will be doing another quiz, and every week up until, for a while, I'll be doing random questions and quizzes for you guys. So check that out. And again, we are going to be talking about line work today with my dude Shane Penn. Next week, I'm going to be doing a couple episodes of the best ofs of the year. One's going to be the best of quotes from all of our artists we've had on the show. And then another one will be the best of different things we've gone through, whether it's been our Glass Knowledge segments, tips and tricks and hacks, conversations with whoever out there that is outside of our industry as well. So, ton of fun there. And then also the next Friday, which is going to be New Year's Eve, we will be having our final installment of our Glass Knowledge page segment for 2016, and then for 2015. Geez, I'm going ahead of myself here. And then we will be on track, and next year is going to be a shit ton of fun. Lots of people lined up, and it's just going to be I got so much stuff going on. I can't wait to share with you guys. Super exciting stuff with the show and where we're going to be going with it. So either way, you guys take care. I'm going to quit rambling here. I love you. 10-minute segment here. Holy shit. So again, reach out to those that you care about. If they have issues, please, please, please reach out. And again, I love you guys. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy what have you. And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon. Take care. Peace.
Now it's time to share some glass knowledge with your host, Jay Michael, and the creator of @GlassKnowledge on Instagram, Shane Penn.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the segment of Glass Knowledge with my boy Shane Penn. How are you doing, dude?
Doing well, man. You know how it is. Just enjoying this beautiful, cold winter day up in northern Minnesota.
Yeah, man, we are in extreme opposites. That's for damn sure. I'm still sweating my ass off. Man, I'm tired of this shit. It sucks. So, yeah, man. So today we are going to be talking about line work. And for those of you who are not familiar with line work refers to any kind of striped pattern on a piece of glass, whether it's segmented colors, single colors, or double colors, or reversals, wigwags, all kind of fun terms we have for line work. And we're going to get into the details of that today and the processes.
Mm-hmm. One of the things to clarify, too, is it doesn't refer to just lines on top of the glass either. It generally refers to the line being fully part of the glass itself, all the way through, where stringer can be wrapped around on top to create line illusions and line stringer work. This is more fully in depth, and it's more full color for those who aren't familiar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, basically solid color tubing, hand pulled tubes.
Exactly.
Even though there are fades and different things you can get into that are more detailed, but
Yeah, of course.
We'll leave that for another segment. So yeah, man. So kind of fun stuff. The whole line work idea for myself too. I know started, 13, 14 years ago when I was really trying to figure out how to make my own tubing, and kind of referencing to soft glass work back in the day of the idea of gathering some color and blowing it out into a ball. And I was like, well, how can I make some line tubes? And some friends of mine were like, try stick stacking. And I'm like, what the hell is that? So then they showed me this whole stick stack process. And now it's evolved into what we call vac stacking, where you're using a vacuum, basically, instead of using your own breath to suck the air out of the piece. It's a lot cleaner, more of a quicker process. And also you can get a bigger piece of glass also made by doing it by a vac stack. But
as well. So there's these two main techniques. Do you know of any other? I've heard there are possibly other ways of doing it as well in boro, but those are the two main, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, my style that I do with my work, I'm more of a transparency kind of dude with my colors. I'm all about opaque colors, but I like to see through the glass. So for myself personally, I do what I would call a rod encasement, where basically you're taking a color and drawing a heavy encasement over a piece of tubing. Instead of having the multiple layers of the clear and color and clear, like in a vac stack, for instance, I'm actually just drawing my color right onto the tubing, and then you can put a sleeve of glass over that, and then you can pull it out and stretch it out and do whatever. But that's kind of another idea of I call it a rod encasement, because you're encasing a tube with a rod of glass.
Very cool. So as we've talked before, a lot of our other glass techniques out there, line working can be traced back all the way in as far back as we can go. You were talking earlier that even some of the ancient Egyptian type glass, they were using these line ideas where it's just fully worked line pieces, not quite like we have today, where these vibrant colors with very obvious stripings, but the idea and the concepts were still there. And then it's also been very apparent in soft glass for, probably most likely back to the Venetians when they were working with reticellos, and I had the idea of having many lines going in opposite directions. So the idea of as long as there's art, there's always been lines, and that's line work really refers to all of these different things. And one of the things about line work as well that we need to talk about is that there are so many different individual techniques to get different results within line work itself.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's the fun part. You got your wigwags and reversals and twists and spins and all kind of fun stuff. And then you another time down the road, the bitch windows and that kind of fun stuff, which is a silly term, but it's kind of, I'm not really sure the origins of that, but those are different areas you can even get into using line work. So it's kind of a fun concept. But doing the vac stack is kind of the part of the process from the very beginning. Basically, what it refers to is we would take a wood dowel. Some people would use a rod of glass, but actually you had to use a wood dowel, and you would use maybe an inch of one end of the dowel, and you would take your color rods that were all cut to the same lengths. Sometimes it took anywhere from 10 to 12 rods, depending on the diameter of the rod itself, and you would basically make a perfectly wrapped, I guess, a tube of rods around the rod or around the dowel, and then use a hose clamp basically to lock that glass onto the dowel, and then you would have to make a sleeve of glass that would go over that whole entire section of glass rods that are coming off the dowel. But before you did that, you had to flare out a piece of tubing and attach it to the very end of your rod, so you had actually something to have the process starting with your rods on a tube of glass. And then once you had your flared out piece and you would hit up the ends of the rods, you would attach your flared tube, you could actually then pull that off of the dowel and then sleeve over the top of that. And then your sleeve would actually encase the color inside of itself. It's kind of a weird process. There's variations of how people do it. That was how I did it myself and how it was shown. And the results were always pretty good, but I did have a lot of waste a lot of times. They call it the knuckle, which is basically the very ends of the tube. Wouldn't pull out as even as I wanted it to. Compared now with vac stacking, you get a nice, even, consistent tube pull because of the consistent amount of heat you can have. The air is being drawn out very systematically by the vacuum in a consistency so that your whole tube from end, start to finish, more or less, is very, very clean. Now, you do have a little bit of waste, but it's minimal compared to what it used to be.
So the process you described that you used to do is the stick stack, correct?
The stick stacking part, yeah.
So the difference for those listening, the difference between the two of them really is that the stick stack, the first thing is the vacuum that you're creating, you're using your own breath. So anytime you're using your own breath for that, you're introducing probably not the best air quality to your lungs. You're taking the risk of injury, stuff like that. But also you're just not as efficient as a constant rotating or a constant pulling vacuum that the vac stack relies on. So that's the first big difference. And I think the other difference is that I've come to understand is, like you said, it's the vac stack is the color is formed around a clear rod or a clear dowel of clear glass around that, and then encased in another one before putting through the flame work, correct?
Right. The vac stack tech basically is to get technical, I guess, in terms of size-wise, I'll take a piece of 18 mil tubing, and that's my core. And then you take your rods of glass, say 6 inches long each, and that go around the core of that tubing. And then you have
filling in a pattern accordingly.
Right, exactly. Whatever you want to do, yeah, for sure. And then you have a sleeve of some 35, 32, or 44 millimeter tubing that would be the sleeve that would go over that process. Now, the tricky part of the whole thing is because you are using thicker glass and a lot of materials, you have to preheat all your stuff ahead of time to make sure you have no thermal shock, which makes it a lot more beneficial. You also have to create a collar for yourself on a piece of tubing, because once you slide, basically what you have is a section of tube that is on a blowpipe, and that blowpipe is what you attach to your vacuum. So that becomes your sleeve that goes over the color. But because you have the core on the inside that's also tubing, one end of the tubing has to be closed off, where the other end has to be open. Right. So
the vacuum has to. Otherwise, they'll just pull air through the system.
Right, exactly.
Instead of taking the air out of it, which is that what you want. Is once, more or less, the idea is that you have all the colors around the central tubing with a little bit of airspace, and once you melt it all together and pull all that air out, you do a full, perfect encasement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, so once you're with your end that's open, that's where you actually attach the other blowpipe to that covers the entire section, so you can actually blow air inside the tubing while the vacuum is sucking air out of the in-between sections because basically the color is sandwiched in between the sections of clear. But also the beauty of the vac stack as well is because each color is round, you have a valley in between each color rod. And a lot of times when you do stick stacking, you can't always get the air out of those valleys. And with a vac stack, you get a nice, clean suction of the air out of it. A lot of milli work and what have you is done the same exact way it's a vac stack technique, because it really gets all the air out of everything that you have inside the tube. And then you have this perfectly nice, clean section of tubing. But also when you get into doing the vac stacks and the stick stacking and whatever else you want to do, it also variations depend on what kind of color you're actually using, whether you're using a transparent color or more an opaque color. Because some colors will actually blend in perfectly where you can't see any grooves or lines at all. and then other colors actually leave still a little bit of a shape to it, almost like you can see the stripe shape in there.
From what I've come to a lot, and the tips I've picked up from a few people I've talked to about as well, one of the things you can do to avoid that shaping is filling those valleys with pulled stringer of the same color in order to make a almost more flush design all the way around your tubing. It takes a little bit longer, from what I understand, because you have to then pull that stringer color and then insert it in there as well. So you have to have all that stringer preheated too for the same reasons as before, just like everything else. But it allows for that smoother, more contour over the top. But I think one of the most important things you just talked about is, one, knowing your colors then and how they work together and how even being paired next to each other will melt into one another. But two is just understanding your palette and just understanding like how the colors are going to work together in the line work itself. Honestly, color choice when creating a set of line tubing is so unbelievably important, and honestly is where most of the creativity in your piece is going to come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Especially when you get to the point where you start doing reversal work and you need to find a section where you're going to have, pop your hole basically to attach a blowpipe to reverse it. And if you're using really colors that bubble really bad, like some cabin colors are jacked up, or even getting into where like your line's too narrow and you want to pop a hole and you don't get a nice, even, consistent hole, you end up bringing 2 or 3 colors into your opening. And then when you go to put your sections together, they don't line up properly, so it looks like shit in the end. But, one of the things, too, I like is when in terms of the different types of patterns you're getting into, you have, like, your jailbreaks, which is, like, your black and white kind of offset patterns. You have fire and ice, where, like, one half of your sections of colors are oranges and reds and yellows. The other halves are blues and whites and, real pretty kind of transitions. And then you have, like, your fades to clear, where, like, it goes from, like, this really nice opaque color into more of a transition to a transparent color, and then into almost half the section is clear. If not, sometimes I can do 2/3 of it clear, depending on what you're going with. But even at that point in time, you still want to use clear rods in there to make sure you fill in the space in the cavity that you're working with. So it's kind of fun, getting into those different variations, and then you get into all the other variations of wigwags and pulling down after you pull your tube down.
Absolutely. And for those out there, and maybe some of you are glass artists, and some of you who don't care, but those new in the glass industry and glass artists, you don't fret. Like, you don't have to be trying to do this all at once. There are options, and there are other ways of you to be able to do line work without having to do the vac stack or the stick stack. A lot of companies like Global Glass, or a few other color companies, a lot of random glass companies do sell already pre-made color combinations of their own colors in stacked form. It just does cost a little extra.
Yeah, Mountain Glass has a whole line of Golden Gate, I believe they carry, is the brand, that are all nice, real pretty stuff. And what's also fun, too, when you get into the vac stacking is you can start incorporating dichroic strips into it. You can do, there's a ton of crap you can get into when you really get into the nitty-gritty of what you're doing. Opals, you can drop opals inside of it. I mean, there's you can get real sneaky with some stuff, and people are like, how the hell did you do that? And you
absolutely
don't tell them.
And I think that's one big thing that comes on any of these arts where, like, if you want your prepped pieces, bought, you can do that. You can buy them already pre-prepped, already lined, already vac stacked. But if you want the control over exactly how your color looks and you want to add that little dichro, you want to add those sparkles, well, then the vac stack and the stick stacks and all these different, like, encasement ideas are things you should definitely explore.
Yeah, I agree. And, kind of going into the origins of the techniques, I guess in terms of the pipe making techniques wise with using line work. I remember seeing coming out of Humboldt when Jason Lee and Marcel and all those cats were really doing a lot of the heavy line work and the reversals and just crazy stuff. I'm like, what the hell are these guys doing? And we were trying to figure it out, so we were doing a lot of inside-out work and trying to see how many lines we could actually lay inside of a piece of tubing. We'd have competitions get like 85, 90 lines of glass inside of a tube. And it came out looking pretty sweet when it was all said and done, but that's a lot of damn work when you're trying to draw, 100 fucking stringers inside lines inside of a piece of tubing. I mean, it's just
all hot
crazy.
Together.
Yeah, it's insane. And even trying to keep it consistent and doing this whole line work stuff, especially with vac stacking nowadays, it's like it makes everything way more consistent. And by doing it that way, you get a shit ton of prep. I mean, you can literally take like a 6-inch section of prep and get almost a 4-foot tube if you get it stretched out to the right consistent diameter. And really, that's probably the key that I would say is the most important part of this process is the actual tube pull itself. And what that means is taking the mass now that you have incorporated everything into that's all consistently the same temperature before you stretch it out. And it also helps, too, if you have someone there to help you pull your tube down because obviously, depending on how tall you are, you're going to have a shorter or longer wingspan, per se. and it helps myself. I'm like 6 foot tall, and my arms are probably 7 foot long. I got some long ass monkey arms, but I've had to have friends help me pull my tubes down. And it's also fun, you get into working teamwork. It kind of goes back to the days of soft glass working, It's like that's the beauty now where we're at with this new stuff we're doing, working bigger and bigger and bigger, and now we're incorporating each other into our work.
I think that's the big thing too, is the vac stack and the stick stacks. They do kind of require a friend. It's not something you can just do alone all the way through. But if you do need to do it alone, if you do need to do a pull alone, and you do have access to a lathe, you can always put that thing in the lathe and just pull on your own against it. I've seen one person do that and work out pretty successfully.
Yeah, my buddy Burley, he has a 16-foot gap space with his lathe that he's got, and he does some huge tube pulls.
Yep. So that's an easy way to do it as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But it's cool, man, because when you start once you have your tube pulled down, now you can then rip off little sections of it, 3-inch sections or whatever, and then you can take that section and stretch that down now to like a 4 or 5-inch section, to where it's probably say like maybe 10 to 12 mil diameter, outside diameter, and then you get into your techniques of doing your wigwags, or like a switchback technique where your lines are, I don't know, undulating, is that the right term? I don't know what term to use, but the kind of the back and forth, kind of up and down zigzag kind of pattern that it creates, And even that process, there's two major foundations that I know in terms of doing that, and that's one is the wig and then the wag, and then the one that I use, which I've been teaching people, is the bender back technique. And and that's one of those techs that not a lot of people know about. It's been spreading in Florida. When I showed somebody about 10 years ago, and it's been kind of going around. If you guys follow Lever Two Stacks, Levi, he's learned it from me, and he's taken the concept and really run with the whole idea. And basically what the idea with the bender back technique is if you imagine that you are heating a section of line work, your tube, and while you're rotating your glass, if you get it evenly heated in a smaller section, using, like your smallest flame basically, and while you're continuing to rotate the glass, you actually bend the tubing in like an arch. Oh. And by doing that, it causes the tubing in the line to create a natural arch. But the trick is when you have to actually then straighten it back out while you're still rotating the glass, so you don't lose that arch. And I know guys, referring back to Jason Lee, he's very mathematical with his pattern work, with his, with the way he does his patterns and connections to everything. He works in odd numbers, in 3, 5, 7s, 9s, what have you. So when you work with wigwags, it's imperative that you start off by giving your opposite terminations on your ends first. Say you do like a five wigwag pattern per se, as a kind of an example. So you do your outside terminations, you do your center arch, first wigwag, and then you go in between those and you fill in the gaps. So now you have five things going on. And depending on how much space you have, you can even go in between each one of those arches and give you another one. And again, by doing the bender back technique, it really gives you the ability to make a nice clean arch. It keeps everything in line. A lot of times when you're doing wigwags, the lines will kind of almost twist on you, like a pattern will have a twist to it. And you have to go back and heat it up and clean it up so everything's like all your arch and all your points and your peaks and your valleys are all concentrically lined up in a nice straight line. But by doing the bender back technique, while you're doing your arch, you can actually watch the arch happen and make it so it's exactly like the one next to it. It's kind of a weird thing. I'm actually thinking about this now. I'm going to be starting a YouTube video channel here this year for January for starting off the next season of the show. And I would like to start incorporating our segments into the YouTube channel by showing an actual demonstration of what we're talking about. The bender back technique, again, is something that a lot of people know. I actually got it from Box Fan Willie years and years and years ago, from when they first started the flow, and he had a little video on the old GDLGA or whatever the hell the thing was called. And
that's pretty cool, though.
Yeah, dude, and it's honestly it cuts the time in half, if not even more, when you're doing wigwag patterns and stuff. It's a good production technique. A lot of people don't like the idea of rushing through your wigwags, but once you learn this process, you'll understand why I'm saying it.
Oh, so in other words, it doesn't allow for the mathematical precision that some people really take pride in their wigwags. It allows for a quick, eye-pleasing product at the end of it.
Right, but even the process of the bender back allows you to really incorporate the math even more so. Because when you're heating up sections, just so the section you're heating actually creates your arch. So, So if you heat up, 5 sections, you're going to have 5 arches on there.
I guess that makes sense then. Huh. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. I guess I'm learning things every day too here.
That's what it's all about, man.
Yeah, all about sharing knowledge. And that, I think that's a good idea with the videos and things like that. Which the more we can share, the better, push people forward.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so once you get that wig-wag pattern, you got to blow it into a ball, and then you go from there with it, and you can reverse it, which means you pop a hole. You basically take your north, south, east, west. So if you're looking north, south with your termination, then you pop a hole in the west side, and you put a blowpipe on there, and then you reverse it. Now you have your west and east are going north and south. It's if that makes any sense to anybody.
It makes sense.
So that's kind of the idea with it, and then you can start adding sections to each other. I mean, it's we can go on for days about this whole concept, but by having all of this clean line work prep done, you can take it and make a shit ton of work out of it, especially if you're incorporating in clear, even more so.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's a lot of these techniques have been flushed out in the last, 200 years in that sense, where since modern glass blowing has really come into the scene in the late 1800s, line working was one of those things where that was, I think it was the German montage technique is like really where it first started to really pick up pace. And that's, I know like Jason Lee and Ease Glass and like a lot of those old school like West Coast guys that you were looking at, that's where they pulled those techniques from, was from these German guys already. And like, if there's anyone who's going to perfect a technique quickly, it's going to be the Germans. Mm-hmm. So they, it was all those old oil lamp workers that have really started this. So it's really interesting to hear like how far these techniques have come and how like simple, how a lot of it hasn't changed either when you really think about like how it's crossed over from soft glass into hard glass.
Yeah, and that reminds me too, another way of doing line work is by doing encalmo work and by building a tube out of encalmos, and then you just blow it in a ball, pop a hole, reverse it, and now you have line work.
It's true.
So it's kind of an interesting concept, like the whole montage idea. So, yeah, man, anything else you want to throw out there in this whole process?
I think as far as line work goes, I got to say that those listening, that you can have the coolest vac stacks in the world and they can be the coolest color combos in the world, but if you don't use them right, it ain't worth it. And it goes for the same on the other side too, which is if you can have some of the coolest designs out there, but if you're not willing to take the time to pick out some cool colors and like actually put some of your own art into it and feel into it, you might not get the necessary result either. So good balance between the two ideas allows for good line work to happen, good technique and a lot of patience and good color choices as always.
Yeah, I agree. And one more tip I would give everybody is that this is not a cheap technique. You can literally go through a pound of color in a vac stack. So start small when you do it. And if you can, even go and get like a bag of little shorts you can get off eBay for like $30 just to practice the process. But also make sure that you can get as close as possible that all your rods are the same diameter, which not to plug Glass Alchemy, but that's one of their nice things with their hand or their machine called pulled color is it's pretty consistent in terms of 6 to 8 millimeter diameter, so you know what you're getting. Makes it way easier.
I would highly recommend, as always, if you have the opportunity, if you have the chance, try to take classes from artists out there. And if you don't have any available, talk to local artists. Be like, hey, what will it cost me to come over for a day and learn how to vac stack with you? I like your work. You're in the area. Like, it just takes reaching out, and a lot of artists are receptive to and opening up to like let you come for a day. In fact, a lot of them would like the help even.
Yeah, man, that gives me a good transition. Kind of wrap this up too. A plug is that starting here next year as well. We're starting classes at my studio, my Chad and myself, and we're going to be kind of like you're saying. We're going to be teaching classes that are specifically going towards certain techniques, whether it's like vac stacking or doing opal encasements or what have you. It's going to be one-day classes, weekend-long classes, the whole 9 yards. So that'll be all posted here pretty soon as well.
Sweet. I have seen webinars out there as well, all the way from things like working with how to work with Crush Opal with Big Z and other things out there too.
Yep.
So the information's out there. You just got to look for it. But we're glad you started here.
Yeah, that's right. So, all right, man. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody, for this segment of Glass Knowledge, talking about line work. And we will see you guys next week when we get into the next topics.
Yeah, just take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Take it easy. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show. If you have any questions, comments, or remarks, please leave them in the show notes page area where it says comments. We'll see you soon. Have a wise night.